Welcome into episode 356 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, the Bruins fell to the Panthers for the second time in a week this afternoon at the Garden, a Columbus Day matinee in Boston. And let's just get right into the opening shifts because there's a lot to discuss from this game and the first week of the season for the Bruins. And I will start us off with the beginning of the NHL season is always a crapshoot, for lack of a better word. You have teams that will end the year towards the bottom of the standings that get off to hot starts, teams that finish towards the top of the standings, sometimes get off to slow starts, and everything in between. The Bruins are no different. So on the one hand, you don't want to put too much stock into the early part of the NHL season. But on the other hand, we have to discuss it because it's what's the topic at hand. And my assessment of the Bruins for the first week of the season is just that there's a lack of attention to detail and a bit of disrespect in the checking game where they're losing a lot of one-on-one battles, a lot of foot races to pucks. And I just feel like this team has far too many good players, far too many veterans at important positions that have been there, done that for this to be the case. So we'll break it all down, but I would say the first week I'm a little bit disappointed and surprised at their lack of maybe competes strong, but it just hasn't been sharp, even in victory.
Yeah, it is kind of like I want to get into a little bit more as we go. You know, some of the weird starts. The Oilers once again off to just an absolutely awful start. They've been the worst team in the NHL so far, which is wild.
Yeah, remember we were talking about how that I think it was Sportsnet panel, like 16 out of 20 of them picked the Oilers to win the cup.
I mean, some idiot on here picked them to win the cup. I don't know who that was, but
wasn't me.
No, hey, you know what though? Last year I picked them to get to the final, and they started awful, and then they still got to the final. So, yeah. So my opening shift. So Brian highlighted one of the things that Jim Montgomery called his team out for after the game, which was losing battles. Another thing he called them out for was losing the mental side of the battle with the Panthers, which we kind of saw again, where I thought the first 10, 11 minutes of this game, both teams were playing pretty straight up. You kind of wondered, okay, no Matthew Tkachuk, no Alexander Barkov. Does that sort of cool the temperature a little bit? And I thought for the first half of the first period, it kind of did. It was a 1-1 game. I thought both teams were playing pretty well. And then AJ Greer runs David Pastrnak from behind, and here we go again. And now the whole game kind of devolves into trying to get revenge and trying to fight guys. And the very next shift after, so Pavel Zacha jumps in and fights Greer. Good for him. Montgomery loved that. I think everyone did. Very next shift, Charlie McAvoy cross-checks Carter Verhaeghe. Panthers power play. Sam Reinhart scores 6 seconds in. 2-1 Panthers. 1 minute after that, David Pastrnak hits Sam Reinhart late. Okay, another penalty. They kill that one, but parade to the box. And I get the frustration, right? Like, seems like every time they play the Panthers, someone over there gets away with something like Greer did. Should have been a penalty. It was a clear hit from behind. 2 minutes. The refs missed it. The Bruins against this team in particular keep letting that kind of stuff take them out of their game. They were playing well, and all of a sudden, the entire rest of the first period was, we need to get revenge. And it's like, again, totally understand the frustration. We're all humans. Like, it's a hit on Pastrnak, your best player. But you just keep giving goals and points away to the Panthers. And that's kind of what ends up happening. The Bruins never had the lead after that. They did tie it at one point and then made more mistakes that we're going to get into. But they once again, just kind of allowed themselves to mentally get taken out of this game, even if it was only for half a period. I didn't think it lasted the entire game, but for a good 10-minute stretch, like, they weren't focused on playing hockey.
Yeah, and my opening shift has to do with basically where their scoring has come from in the first week of the season and where it hasn't come from. And the middle six for the Bruins has really been struggling through the first 4 games of the season. And I want to go through some of the stats from where the goals have come from. And top line leads the way with 6 goals. They have 15 goals so far, which, by the way, is 4th best in the league, yet they're 2-2. And I understand they're playing the reigning Stanley Cup champion, so that's not the easiest thing to do to start your season that way. But so the top line with Lindholm, Zacha, and Pastrnak have combined for 6 goals. The second line has no goals, with Coyle and Geekie having no points either. And third line, 1 goal from Trent Frederick. Fourth line has 4 goals, and the D has 4 goals. And I think that, well, the lack of production did lead to Coyle and Geekie getting limited ice time against the Panthers today. And it's just a sign of Montgomery's frustration with them. But I really do think the fourth line has definitely exceeded expectations. They were on the ice for every single goal the Bruins scored today. And they always seem to follow up a opposing team's goal with really strong play, that whether or not it's a goal on their shift or not, it's always changing the momentum back in the Bruins' favor immediately following that goal from the other team. So, and Jim Montgomery said after the game that they're really one of the only lines that's contributing in their role. They know their role, they're doing it well, whereas the second and third line really haven't so far. So they've been impressive where the middle six have failed.
Well, yeah, the fourth line has been their best line, just flat out, like by every possible metric you could look at. I mean, if you pull back from like what individuals have done, if you just look at which lines have been on the ice for Bruins goals, that fourth line has been on the ice for 7 goals at 5-on-5. First line's been on the ice for 3, third line 1, second line 0 so far. Like, they're honestly carrying the team offensively. They're also starting most of their shifts in the defensive zone. Like, they've been awesome. And yeah, the rest of the team needs to catch up.
Yeah, I mean, Koepke and Beecher have the best plus minus on the team with +6 right now. And Scott, you said that Trent Frederick is the worst with -7. That snuck up on me. I didn't realize he was that far into the minus at this point. But the fact that your fourth liners are the 2 guys with the top plus minus on the team shows you that they're doing the right things pretty much every time they're on the ice, guys. I can't think of a shift where I was like, oh, that one they took off. Or can you? Because I feel like they're doing what they need to do all 4 games pretty consistently.
Yeah, opening night wasn't great for anybody, but Scott did mention the episode afterwards that of the team, they were the better line that night, and I don't disagree with that. I think the third line, Trent Frederick's lone goal, not to take it away from him, because it was a nice pass by Brazeau and a nice finish by Frederick, but it was in garbage time. And this fourth line has been, yes, they have exceeded expectations. However, I'm not totally surprised based off of what I saw in training camp that this is the way that it's played out. And the reason I say that is because Brad Marchand played one period of hockey during the preseason. Charlie Coyle didn't play a preseason game until probably their 5th or 6th game of the preseason. And I don't know if maybe one more game after that, but Morgan Geekie didn't, like, nobody, Pastrnak, Zacha, Lindholm, none of the regulars were really looking too sharp in preseason. And I get that it's preseason, but the fourth line of Koepke, Kastelik, and Beecher, they did look sharp. And I mentioned it on this podcast on an episode. I'm looking to them to pick up the Bruins in the early start of the season when everybody else is still getting their legs under them. And so far, that's exactly what we've seen.
Yeah, that they were also the one line that was healthy all preseason and through camp. Elias Lindholm ended up being like at least a full week, almost a week and a half. Brad Marchand missed the first week, if you're looking at the second line. Matt Poitras missed the final week of camp, if you're looking at the third line. Like, you don't want to make excuses. The season's underway, and now we're a week in, so you got to be up to speed at this point. But I do think it helped. It definitely helped how much Beecher, Kaslik, and Koepke got to play together, because they were aligned like almost from day one of camp, and Montgomery just pretty much never touched them.
Yeah, and the injuries you mentioned, Scott, they're legit, and they all contribute to the fact that Boston just didn't have a strong training camp as a team. And I'm not damning them for it. It's just the reality. Like, I don't think anybody went into opening night against Florida saying, yeah, Boston's intensity looked like it was ready to go, at least as much as you can tell based off of preseason. And I'm not watching preseason for around the league with other teams either, so I can't really compare them. But just the eye test alone, being at the rink for practices and what we saw on TV during games, it just looked to me like that line was going to have to be there for them early. And like I said, they have so far.
Yeah, and during this game with the Panthers, to bring it back to today's game, and something we talked about, which was, the lack of ice time for Geeky and Coyle. Well, they switched up the lines because obviously something has to change with the middle six. So they put Patra, who had a good game, which we didn't talk after this game, but he had a good game against the Kings. He assisted on the game-winning goal, and coach said that was one of his strongest games, maybe his strongest game that he's played in his career. So he gets moved up with Brazeau and Marchand just to try to spark something different, to try a different dynamic. And I want your thoughts on, do you think that is a combination that could work, that they could go to?
I am at least curious about the Patra Marchand dynamic. Like, whether it's Patra at center, or if they give him a look at right wing and Coyle comes back up to center. I do think I think you're getting to a point where it's worth giving that combination a look to see if it can get, specifically, like if it can get Marchand going and get your second line going, because Patra is, at least in that game against the Kings, was their best offensive creator. I mean, he was making more things happen than anyone else on the team. Now, he didn't have nearly as good of a game Monday against Florida. That's, probably going to happen with a player who's still young and who's just coming back, in the big picture, from a major injury that ended his season last year, and then also from a minor injury that cost him the end of training camp. But
against one of the tougher, more gritty teams in the league.
Yeah. So I am at least interested in that dynamic. I don't know if it sticks with Brazeau there. I feel like his game's been a little up and down so far. There's been some promising moments, but also some shifts where, quite frankly, he's looked behind the play. But yeah, I mean, you definitely have to try something, because so far, of all the Bruins who have played at least 2 games this season, and I think it is, hold on, let me make sure I have this number right. 18 Bruins skaters have played at least 2 games so far. The only 2 without a point are Charlie Coyle and Morgan Geeky. And both of them at points in this game, kind of got benched, got skipped for shifts. Morgan Geeky was under 10 minutes of ice time, lowest on the team. One thing that really stands out to me here is with Coyle, I don't he just seems off. I don't know if something's going on, but how many times have you seen one of those classic Coyle shifts where he drives into the offensive zone, holds off a defender, protects the puck down low, makes things happen like that? I don't know if I've seen it at all this year. Maybe once or twice.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it's been notable. He's coming off of a 60-point season in an elevated role. I mean, if he got off to this start last year, who knows where the Bruins end up, because they had such a strong start. And you don't want to say there's any complacency, because that's not fair. I mean, it's too small of a sample size, but it definitely hasn't seemed like the same Coyle who started last year. And when you mention Morgan Geeky's ice time, Scott, yeah, Morgan Geeky played 9 minutes and 33 seconds, as you mentioned, lowest in the team. And it wasn't kind of a benching. It's absolutely a benching. That's not to have the lowest time on ice in the team when you're the second line right wing, so to speak. That's what's that tell you? And then Charlie Coyle finished with 14 minutes and 34 seconds. That was his lowest time on ice since 14 minutes and 13 seconds versus Detroit, which was October 28th of last season. So almost a full calendar year.
Frederick was only 12.5.
Yeah, but at least Frederick, you could expect that happens time and again. But Charlie Coyle is your second line center playing 14 minutes. Like that's very indicative of where Montgomery feels as though his game's at right now, and he has to pick it up. And yeah, Scott, you're bang on. And look, it's difficult because you don't want to damn a player for 4 games. But at the end of the day, it's early in the season for everybody. And I'm sorry, but the calendar is no excuse for lackadaisical play. It's no one here is saying he's not going to get up to speed or that he can't turn it around next game. I'm sure he will soon. But through 4 games, we can only go off of what we've seen, and it just hasn't been good enough.
I think maybe like a way to describe it that's different than how he normally plays is I feel like he's been a little hesitant. Like normally he's kind of aggressive and charges pucks and gets possession back if he turns it over, if someone else turns it over. But I feel like he has been maybe just not pressuring quite as tightly as he normally would when he's at his best. So being hesitant in any part of the game, including special teams, by the way, because he's on the second power play unit. I think he's been a decent penalty killer still. But just a slight hesitation can really slow down the game, and taking the pressure off can hurt your line, and your shifts aren't as successful normally. So yeah, I agree with you guys. I don't think I can come up with a shift where I'm thinking like, oh, this is the classic puck possession that you see from Charlie Coyle. He had one really good breakaway that he didn't finish. That was maybe his best chance of the season.
As I'm thinking about it, I was gonna say maybe the opening shift of, I'm pretty sure, I think it was the Montreal game. That line started, and I thought they had a really good first shift and drew a penalty. But like, that's it. And that took me like a couple minutes to come up with that. So,
and that's Montreal.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, Florida's they're the defending Stanley Cup champions, so they're one end of the spectrum. Montreal is the other end. I mean, that was a public skate for the Bruins that night as far as defensive coverage goes by the Canadians. Not to take it away from Boston, but it was just a much different game.
Yeah, it definitely was.
You know what I would try, and like, this just seems easy, is Marchand, Coyle, Patra. Again, like, see if Patra can spark that, keep Coyle there. Then go Frederick, Geekie, Brazeau as your third line, and maybe moving to center gets Geekie more involved, because I feel like there's been too many shifts where he just like has been invisible. He just hasn't been noticeable. So maybe that forces him to get into the action more.
Oh yeah, totally.
And if you have Patra as the wing, that frees him up a little bit more to not have to worry about getting back defensively. Like when he's been, some of the really nice plays that he's been all the way deep in the offensive zone, like making a play from behind the goal line and passing it back. He likes to do this like no look spin around backhand pass into the slot and into the crease. And I feel like he's pretty effective when he's down low in the zone, finding the open guy and creating some sort of high danger chance. So, and that doesn't normally happen when you're playing center and you have to worry about not getting caught too deep. So maybe keeping him at the wing rather than center, just to try the next thing to try could work out pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, Coyle has to stay where he is just because it's just the way that their roster is made up. I mean, you could sit here and say Matt Patra could work his way as second line center and Coyle goes. I just with the way this roster is made up personnel wise, I don't see it. The more likely thing I would see at some point would be splitting up Zacha and Pasternak and putting Zacha as now your second line center or something like that. I would see that before anything else. I think moving Geekie to center certainly would probably help him be more engaged because to say he's been invisible has been that's probably a compliment because it's kind of omitting some of his bad plays.
I think at least the first game of the season, he had some good play. I don't think he's been invisible, but he hasn't been consistent.
I'm not. Yeah, but look, no disrespect to Geekie, but I'm not going to sit here and applaud a player for making a good play here and there over the course of 4 games. Like they're NHL players. They should all be making a couple plays here and there. That's just the way I feel. I mean, the fourth line, Kaslik has 5 points. Kepke has 4 points. Beecher's, where's Beecher at? 4 points as well. Like that's not sustainable for the fourth line. Like these guys have to pick it up. They're paid to score, not get a couple shots off. Like it's just not good enough. And I just don't know if the fit's there. Like I feel like Geeky and Coyle and Marchand was a little bit force fed. We talked about how Coyle and Frederick had chemistry. That could have been a tryout there. And Patra with Marchand and Coyle, I could see that too. Geeky has crafty hands and he has a good shot when he gets it off, but I just don't know if I don't know. I haven't seen it enough, I guess, to really criticize him yet. And
we're back to the same discussion of the offseason, which is who do you plug in as your second line right wing? And at this point, you think maybe you could have a conversation like, oh, maybe bring up Fabian Lysell, but there's just not really room for him right now because who do you send down? Usually you end up sending down a fourth liner. Well, the fourth line's the one line that's playing great. So,
well, your boy Riley Tufte.
Yeah, but I'm saying, who do you take out of the lineup, though? I'm not saying, like, obviously he didn't play. So who do you take out of the lineup to bring up Fabian Lysell?
True. Yeah, I'm not like knocking on the door to bring up. I would try Patra there.
It just doesn't
like that. That would be the next thing I'd try.
What about TJ?
Yeah, he's still hanging around. Doesn't have a contract yet.
At least he has experience thinking the game with elite players. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I mean, like and Palat and Point, like those guys. You have to think the game at an impressive level to even play with those guys, let alone physically keep up with them.
Scott, you going to practice tomorrow morning?
Yes, I am.
Well, why don't you ask Coach if Tyler Johnson, if there's any update on Tyler Johnson?
That's a Donnie Sweeney call, but I appreciate the question. Is what he's going to say.
There you go. Yeah, that's the exact answer.
That's true. And we don't obviously get access to Don Sweeney very often. So that's probably a question that's not going to get answered. And we don't really know where or if he's been getting reps somewhere. You got to imagine he's somewhere skating.
I mean, he's been skating with the team at Warrior. He didn't travel to Florida with them. Yeah, but this past week when they've been home, he's been on the ice with them.
I didn't realize that. I haven't been to practice this week, but well, that's a good sign for him then.
He's been with he depending on what the game lineup was that ensuing day, he's been with in a gold jersey with Max Jones and Patra on a practice. Another practice, it was probably Jones and whoever the scratch was.
And Tufte, yeah.
Tufte, there you go. So, but yeah, not an optimal solution. But again, we're talking about a second line that's been offensively anemic, and I just think that. Granted, he's not under contract, and do they have the cap space? I don't know, but it's an option. It's an option to jumpstart some guys' confidence because one thing you don't want to have happen is have some of your key guys go too long without hitting the score sheet because they'll start to feel the pressure, and you just want to avoid that as possible. The one thing about Pasternak and Lindholm and Zacha is, I'm sure they want to improve as everybody does, but at least they've gotten some touches and they've gotten some points on the board, and that's important for top players. And Marchand with sitting at I think 2 points maybe, but I think they might be special teams. Coyle and Geeky, as we know, with 0 points, and Frederick Brazeau, they're not lighting it up either. So you got to find a way to get their confidence going, and maybe a guy like Johnson could help that. As crazy as that sounds.
I don't think it sounds crazy. I don't think it's a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, I would have serious questions about whether he can still play on a second line on a good team. Just mostly just based on the way that his 5-on-5 production just plummeted last year. But I would rather plug him into a third line role. But who knows? Maybe the Bruins do get to that point.
Well, yeah, it's the whole middle six that hasn't been producing. Third line only has 1 goal, so
I feel like Boston has a way of helping that with players, though, right, Scott? Like you would imagine that his 5-on-5 production could be a little bit better in a better system. Although it hasn't looked too great so far, but we know Boston's a reliable, structured team more often than not.
Yeah, I mean it could help. I don't know. I'm not totally sold on the Tyler Johnson experience, but it is worth taking a look at some point if he's going to be around, which again, as of now, he still is. I guess, we'll see if he's on the ice at Tuesday's practice. We'll see if he goes on the road with them. They have a 3-game road trip, Western road trip coming up. It's 3 games, but it's going to last like 9 days because they have 2 days off between each game. But yeah, it was interesting because Jim Montgomery called out the top 6 after the game. His quote was, really happy with the bottom 6. The fourth line has been very, very impressive. He was asked a follow-up. He said, they're just doing their role. Guys in the top 6 aren't doing their role. They are doing their role. But I feel like he was really just talking about that second line. Like, the first line didn't have a good game Monday against Florida, and that they still have more to give for sure. But like, they have at least been putting up points. I mean, Pasternak leads the team in goals. Had 3 in the first 3 games. Elias Lindholm's tied for the team lead in points with 5, with Mark Kastelik, by the way, Kastelik's already like halfway to his career high in points. His career high in points is 11. He's already got 5.
Is Mark Kastelik the 1C the Bruins needed?
Yeah, right.
Put him in second line center.
Yeah,
rotate him up there.
In all seriousness, like it is, I feel like when we talked about the Linus Ullmark trade, it was like Kastelik was always like the last thing mentioned. And, look, like, not saying a fourth line center is good value for, a number 1 goalie or anything, but he is a real piece of that trade that, as we evaluate this moving forward, obviously Dean Letourneau is going to be the biggest piece, whatever he turns out to be. If he's great, the trade looks great. If he stinks, the trade probably doesn't look very good. But it's like when Korpisalo struggles on opening night, I got so many tweets that were like, "Oh yeah, good thing they traded Ullmark for this guy," and it's like they didn't trade Ullmark for Jonas Korpisalo. Like Korpisalo was the throw-in that they had to take to get the first-round pick, and Mark Kastelik was also like a real part of this trade, as it turns out.
Yeah, well, do you remember when we talked to Pierre, who he said was like who he complimented the most when we talked about this trade?
Yeah, he loved Kastelik.
Yeah, he loved Kastelik. He said he likes his personality, which, by the way, he's very soft-spoken when you talk to him after games. Like he's so intense on the ice and he's scrumming after every whistle, but then you talk to him after and he's just like kind of quiet. And I wasn't expecting it just because I'm used to maybe more of like a Brad Marchand, fiery on the ice, and then he'll say stuff after the game too. But really, I think we're all pleasantly surprised with the way that Kastelik handles himself. And not saying we didn't have, we didn't think he was going to be good, but the expectations were for a fourth line center are obviously lower than, putting up more points than the entire middle 6. So.
Guys, how do you feel about the Bruins team speed through 4 games? We talked about it after the first game against Florida. The Montreal game was a bit of it was a more wide open game, so it probably didn't seem as evident then. But again, I mentioned it off the top that they have too many veterans, too much experience, too many good players that have been around for too long to be losing as many one-on-one battles as they are, to be losing as many a lot of plays dying on sticks. Bridget mentioned that it seems like Coyle is hesitant out there. And I would say the same for a lot of players. I feel like the defensemen they're not being very swift with their decision-making in transition. They don't know whether to go or to move the puck at different times. I don't know. The team just seems slow. Like when they're doing neutral zone regroups, it's like they're just flat-footed oftentimes, at least against Florida. And you watch Florida and they don't have any major speedsters out there, but they play fast as a team, whether it's forechecking, back-checking, or just all around the ice. And to me, guys, that's the biggest thing that separates the Bruins right now from where they want to get to, which is the Florida Panthers, because they are the class of the NHL right now, is the team speed. And there's so many elements to team speed, but that to me has been the most glaring difference between the two clubs.
Yeah, I think you hit it. It's like when I think of whether they're fast or not, I don't even think so much of like just straight line skating ability. It's playing fast. And too often here early in the season, they are not playing fast. And that's, as you said, like decision making, it's crisp passing. How many soft passes have we seen? Like that'll slow you down real fast. So, just stuff like that is, yeah, like it all has to be, it's like everything just has to pick up. And in theory, it should, as you get more practice time and get more into the season and more into the rhythm of things. But maybe that's another byproduct of this disjointed training camp or the injuries or whatever. Like, but yeah, it absolutely needs to pick it up. Jim Montgomery has said as much. I think they all recognize it, but at some point you have to actually go out and do it.
Like when you watch the Panthers, they again, what's his name? Mikola, is that his name?
Nico
Mikola. He's huge. You can't miss him out there. So he has naturally long strides. Okay.
Swayman tried to fight him.
What's that?
Swayman tried to fight him.
Swayman, yeah. Well, he tries to fight everybody. But you watch him and Nate Schmidt, and look, the Panthers lost Brandon Montour in the offseason. They lost Ekman Larson, who can move the puck as well. Like the Panthers decor on paper, yeah, Forsling is a beast. I think he's one of the best defensemen in the league at checking and closing spacing and his gap control. Ekblad is a good player, but you watch the Panthers decor and they're just so decisive. And it's, again, when you're doing neutral zone regroups, it's D to D up, like bang bang, move the puck, or D to D, and the guy is just moving his feet. He's taking the ice that's given to him, and they move it up to the forwards and you watch the Bruins defense, and it's peak circling. It's Carlo fumbling the puck. It's McAvoy looking at 4 different options, not knowing which read. Just move, just go. Just get on your horse and go. And there's so much overthinking. It's just it's like if the forwards aren't open, they don't know what to do. Just take the ice that's given to you. Like the Bruins defense, Lindholm is a great skater. He's a powerful skater, powerful strides. Carlo, the size of his strides alone should allow him to get in the red line. McAvoy, we know, can scoot. Lohrei can scoot. Zadorov's a big boy, but like these guys can move individually, but they're electing to just, I don't know. They're just being way too passive.
It's slowing down their power play too. Like if we want to talk about the power play, which once again, it was a subject of conversation for negative reasons after the Panthers game. I was going through the stats and how they compared to the league, and they're 26th. And by the way, there's still a few teams that are 0% on the power play. Obviously, some teams haven't played all that much, but Leafs are one of them. Leafs, Sabres, Hurricanes, and Ducks have no power play goals. And then the Bruins are just barely above them with 11%, tied with the Predators and Dallas. So it's been another slow start for the Bruins power play.
Yeah, and like they've had some power plays that have looked good, including late in this game. Like the last power play they got, the chance to try to tie the game, they had some great looks, and Pasternak rang the crossbar. Bobrovsky made 2 like A+ saves. One on an Elias Lindholm redirect in the bumper, one on Trent Frederick right in front. But the power plays prior to that, Bruins had 4 of them on the game. The first 3 were not nearly good enough.
Well, they gave up another shorty.
Yeah, so they've given up 2 of those now, which is absolutely a problem. Yeah, just very sloppy. Like it shouldn't take until desperation time in the game when you need to throw everything at the net to try to tie it, to have that kind of mindset of attack.
Yeah. Pasternak and McAvoy have the 2 power play goals so far this year. So they have 2 power play goals and they have 2 shorthanded goles against.
Yeah, and Hampus Lindholm, like did score one and got called back for
Yeah.
goal interference.
But guys, how did McAvoy score his power play goal? Can you tell me?
Shoot.
But not only did he shoot it, but it was within seconds after a one faceoff. And there's two cardinal sins that you can commit on your own power play, which is A, kill your own power play by not shooting the puck, and B, getting outnumbered by the PK players on a loose puck. When you have a man advantage, it's, I shouldn't even have to say this. There should never be a situation where there's a loose puck and you're outnumbered it should never happen. And you see it happen time and again on the Bruins power play beneath the goal line. You'll see, you'll see 3 players for Florida and 2 for Boston. And then it gets iced. It's, well, no shit, it gets iced because you're outnumbered. And, there's just, when you're not shooting the puck, you're making it easy for the penalty killers because they can sit there in their box and keep it to the outside and let you pass it all day long. But if you want to get them out of position, it's when you get, I know it's the most cliche thing, but it's a cliche for a reason. You have to get pucks and bodies to the net, create rebound opportunities, create loose pucks, get the PK out of position. That's when passing lanes open up. But the Bruins sit there passing it around the umbrella like a seam is magically going to open up, and it just doesn't. And it's like you have to create your own opportunities through movement with and without the puck, and Boston's just not doing it at all right now. Not at all, but not nearly enough.
And some of the turnovers right below the blue line have killed them. That's what happened in the shorthanded goal today. Like you're turning it over or you're passing it out of the zone and everybody's going to get back out. Like Poitras had a turnover right at the blue line, and that's what ended up with the shorthanded goal. I mean, he ends up on Jeremy Swayman, so Swayman couldn't do anything about it. I don't really think he got pushed in there. I don't know what you guys think. Reinhart did collide with him, but I feel like he kind of just had momentum and went into Swayman on his own.
Yeah, I mean, Poitras went all out on the back check, and I think just in the process of going all out, like, took himself out. Of course, he wouldn't have had to do that had he not turned the puck over in the first place. Yeah, it was a tough day for the kids. Poitras on that turnover, like, you're just hanging on to it too long against Sam Reinhart, who's an excellent penalty killer and obviously a dangerous offensive weapon. Like, he's too good for that. Lohrei turned the puck over behind the net on Florida's, I think that was their first goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then got caught in a line change on one of the goals where, I put that more on Coyle not getting the puck in deep. Again, like a turnover on an entry. Those are killer. But Lohrei also shouldn't have been changing at the same time as Peak. Lohrei at least got one back and scored a nice goal. So he had that. But yeah, definitely like a teaching day for the kids after both were excellent on Saturday. I'll add.
Besides Beecher, if you count Beecher, the kids.
Right.
I mean,
he's been good.
Slightly older, but he's second year. Just
he's
like
been great.
Guys.
He's been great, guys. Fundamentally, I want to bring something up, and I understand the Bruins broke records in the regular season 2 years ago, and last year they finished 7th in the NHL. So their regular season success is undoubted, right, as it pertains to what I'm about to bring up, which is Jim Montgomery's philosophy of quality over quantity when it comes to shot selection and scoring opportunities. And I understand the thought process behind it, but I also feel like there's a lot of gray area where you really just have to not get too picky with your shot selections and your scoring opportunities, because as I said on the power play, penalty killers don't just run out of position. And in the NHL, your opponent's not just gonna give you quality scoring chances. I think a lot of times quality is a result of improv on the ice and just throwing something to the net and creating chaos and getting teams out of position. I watched the Bruins' fourth line in the first 4 games, and they seem to do that, right? Mark Kaslick will go chase down a puck on the right wing boards, and he'll throw a shot at the net, like with a guy on him. Is that a grade A scoring chance? No, but it leads to chaos and it leads to zone time. I feel like the Florida Panthers play that way. It's a very simple style of hockey, but it's very effective. Coaches can do all the X's and O's they want about high danger chances, where they come from, how to create them. Hockey is a very simple game when you just play fundamentally sound. And I think that the Bruins can learn something by looking at their fourth line and looking at Florida, which is keep the game as simple as it needs to be. And that is where opportunity presents itself, is when your opponent is now scrambling and running around. If you throw a puck at the net and it's not a grade A chance, their defense still have to turn around and go chase down the rebound in the corner, or you know what I'm trying to say? It just, I think the Bruins could do a better job of simplifying the game and making it harder on their opponents at the same time.
Yeah, I feel like they want to do more of that. I mean, Montgomery has clearly placed an emphasis on defensemen being shot ready at the point and firing away. Now, that is with bodies at the front, is the second part of that. And I think they've done that a little bit in spurts, but not consistently enough. And that's really, that's 5-on-5 and power play. Like, I think he wants defensemen shooting and looking for deflections, rebounds, screens, whatever. I just feel like the Bruins haven't quite gotten there yet to the point where they're doing it enough. But it does seem like they want to do a little bit more of like, okay, get bodies to grade A areas and then deliver the puck, as opposed to trying to work the puck inside and, actually have the shot released from a grade A area. So I think they're adjusting a little. I guess we'll see how that kind of continues to evolve and what the end product ends up being this year. Are they a team that's good at that? That's good at scoring on tips, rebounds in front, with defensemen who are willing and able to get shots through? Or do they kind of resort to what they were last year, and all of a sudden you're not using your defenseman that much and you're trying to do, more of that work for a perfect shot type of thing?
How do we feel about, and just to stick with the defenseman right now, how do we feel about Zadorov's first 4 games as a Bruin? Because that at times he has been getting shots through, but he also leads the team in penalty minutes early on. And I just want to get your opinion on how you think he's played so far.
Yeah, it's a good question, Bridget. I was thinking of him during this game, and I couldn't help but think to myself, I really wish he made his presence a little bit more known in these 2 games versus Florida. Now, the Bruins beat Florida all 4 times last year, and we saw what that meant in the playoffs. It doesn't mean anything. It's all about how you're playing in April, and we all know that. But I still think that Florida took some liberties against some Bruins players in the 2 games they've played, and Zadorov
they took out your best player. Like they went after your best player today.
And Scott's mentioned how the Bruins, they've tried, but Florida they won't engage. And that's because Florida's playing more assertive than the Bruins, and they're getting that first punch in, and then they can kind of skate away. And but now we're kind of getting into a game plan for playing Florida in the future. But to your question about Zadorov,
by the way, Greer did that. Kastelik tried to go at him later in the game, and Greer just got cross-checked, didn't even look at Kastelik, just skated away.
Yeah, it's the classic, make a physical play happen and then don't retaliate. Like they're punching first and then they don't have to punch again. The Bruins just sit there with going crazy. But to your question about Zadorov, Bridget, I think he's been okay. I think he, as well as some other newcomers, deserves leash with a new team, new system. I just feel like physically he's been a little bit quiet in the Florida games, but he was physical against Montreal and LA. So I'd say he's been okay so far.
Yeah. Like the first 2 words that came to my mind were okay and fine. Like I kind of think he's just been net neutral. He's done some good things. Brian mentioned the physical play in the Montreal and LA games that you wish there was more of against Florida. I think he's gotten involved offensively at times. he's made some nice pinches down the wall, gotten pucks towards the net. Then he's also had plays where Bridget mentioned the penalties. Like, that's a problem. Can't keep taking penalties. Bruins as a team are taking way too many penalties. They've taken 26 minor penalties this year. No one else has more than Florida at 19. And then after that, no one has more than 16. So, like, outside of Florida, they've taken 10 more minor penalties than any other team through 4 games, guys. Like, too many. They've been shorthanded 22 times, most in the league. And Zadorov, I think, has 10 penalty minutes. So
yeah, he does. And now Zaka is second most because he fought today.
Yeah, so that I'm fine with.
Doesn't really count.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't count those 5 minutes for him because, like, that was. I felt bad for him. Like, it was not a fair fight with Greer.
Well, Scott, tell the audience who Zaka's last fight was against.
It was against Nikita Zadorov, his only other fight in his NHL career.
How'd that one go? I feel like not good for him.
Probably a wrestling match.
But it was the same thing. Yeah, it was the same thing that he did today, though. Zadorov hit a Devils teammate from behind, and Zaka immediately jumped to his defense. So good for Zaka in both cases. Obviously, fighting guys who are much more experienced. Like, he had no chance of beating AJ Greer in a fight, but taking AJ Greer down really isn't. It's not the point there.
It makes it more impressive when you're making the point to stick up for, in this case, the best player on your team, but just a line mate. And I mean, those two guys have been friends. So it's really more impressive to me when it's against somebody that you're not going to win that fight and you're still willing to do it.
Guys, here's what I feel like the Bruins, at least the players, were hoping for in one of these first 2 games against the Panthers. Probably in the first one, more so than the second. But I think in one of these first 2 games this year, the Bruins were hoping that Florida would engage them in, a game with multiple fights where the Bruins can get out some of their frustration and kind of, because the Panthers earned the Stanley Cup last year. They were the better team in the series against the Bruins. They were the best team in the league. They won the Stanley Cup. That series against the Bruins had a couple of moments where it could have swung momentum, where maybe the series would have extended, right? We talked about the Sam Bennett sucker punch on Marchand. Instead of getting suspended, the following game, he gets the game-tying goal, cross-checking Coyle into Swayman. Like, there's a lot. Kachuk fights Pasternak. Like, there's a lot of animosity that despite Florida being the better team, the Bruins are holding against them. And I think they wanted to kind of get a lot of this out of their system and then move on to this year and this year's rendition of their rivalry. And I fear that that hasn't happened yet. And the Bruins are going to keep this bottled up, to Scott's point about losing the mental battle. I was hoping that after these first 2 games, at least in one of them, the Bruins would have got it out of their system, for lack of better terminology. And I think it's still in their system. And I don't know when they play them next, but this could be a problem because until they do, but they're going to be in Boston's heads, but I don't think Florida's going to let them.
Yeah, so they don't play them again now until January 11th. And I feel like that's going to be a really good thing for the Bruins. Like, don't have to think about or worry about Florida for 3 months now. Get into the season, take care of business against other teams. Like, figure out who you are and how you play and what you do well and what your best line combos and all of that are. Like, now you actually settle in and figure that stuff out. And 3 months from now, then you take another shot at the Panthers and see where you are. Like, you guys know, like I said on here, I thought opening against the Panthers was the best thing going into the year. I was like, yeah, give me that like right away. Looking at it now, I think playing them twice in the first 4 games was actually like the worst thing for the Bruins because
I said that wasn't going to be
good. Yeah, like they're just, last year's just too fresh. And I think so much of these 2 games was too much. It was too much about trying to settle scores and carry over from last year. And I just didn't allow the Bruins to like really get into a new season and start to become a new team, because like the reality is like everyone starts from square one again with a new year. And I almost feel like the Bruins weren't able to start on square one.
Right. They just need to not revert back to this mentality when they do play them in January and beyond, because to your point, you're going to spend 2-3 months creating a new season with new players, and you don't want to go back. Right. So again, it's going to be a challenge for Boston because they have to move on. You said it last week, Scott. The best way to get Florida back is to beat them in the scoreboard. And I think Boston was hoping for some closure. They were hoping for some engagement. They didn't get it. Now it's going to be a big test for them when they do move on this year and create good habits and they're playing well. And then here comes their ex right here. And all the bad memories are going to come back, and they have to be able to channel that emotion, because honestly, if they play them in the playoffs again, it's going to be a challenge, because no matter what happens this year with the Bruins against the rest of the NHL, when they play the Panthers, they can't get out of their own way, because Florida's very good at what they do. They're an incredibly good hockey team with a lot of talent, but they're very good at striking first and then turning their backs and just focusing. And Boston has to see past that. In fact, they should probably be the team to strike first and then turn their backs. But that's a story for a later day.
Yeah, never expect to get closure from your ex, and that is just that's advice for the Bruins and for life.
By the way, did you guys see Trent Frederick talking about Matthew Tkachuk over the weekend? I wasn't at Sunday's practice. It was an optional, but Frederick was asked about like all the Tkachuk stuff, because last week he challenged us. He said Tkachuk challenged him to a fight. Then when he actually dropped the gloves, Tkachuk doesn't go. He calls it disrespectful of the game. And the subplot there is Frederick and Tkachuk are friends. They grew up together in St. Louis and were on like a bunch of teams together as kids. And Frederick was like, he said something like, yeah, maybe when our careers are over, we can be friends again, but I can't stand him right now. It's like, when your careers are over, it's like, oh my God. Like they've ruined this lifelong friendship.
It could be a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think he looks at Tkachuk last year fighting with Pastrnak, and you'll hear a lot of people say, "Oh, star versus star." Well, it is star versus star, but they're two completely different types of stars. I mean, if you're gonna do a star versus star fight with Pastrnak, it would be like Pastrnak versus Reinhart or something like that. Tkachuk's, he's thrown down. It's different, right? I think Frederick, obviously, in the Bruins, they took exception to that, and they couldn't do much about it in the playoffs because you don't want to get too penalized and lose a series. So they're hoping to get a crack at it with a fresh slate of a season. And Tkachuk would be like, okay, fine, the stakes aren't so high. I'll go with you in the regular season, and that hasn't been the case yet. All right, so he's clearly pissed off about that.
It's also okay to let friends go out of your life. It's okay. Like he got tricked. And he got beat. Talking about Frederick, like it's okay. If you sometimes you got to cut people out of your life.
You do.
Whose side is Jason Tatum gonna pick?
Oh, it's gotta be Trent. Stay with Boston. But yeah, Tkachuk. They're the ones that are actually.
It's not even a question.
No, I mean they were in class together when they were in like fourth grade or whatever that picture's from, or sixth grade, whatever. It's like middle school.
They brought their respective trophies to St. Louis together this summer.
Yeah, they're actually friends. I don't know if Tatum even really knows Frederick too much, but
I'm not sure if it was championship bonds back in the 2000s with the four major sports teams in town, but I feel like when you had Chara and Bergeron and Ortiz and Brady and Pierce, like I feel like not only their head coaches, but the major sports teams in Boston, I feel like had more of a connection with each other than they do now. I don't really know if there's much mutual friendships. I just don't think they run in the same circles anymore. There used to be that bond of that fraternity. I don't see it anymore necessarily in Boston.
Well, no one stays on the Red Sox or Patriots more than like 3 years at this
That's
point.
True.
So
they
just keep turning over their rosters and rebuilding every couple of years.
Well, but the funny thing is, like the old school Red Sox guys are still in on like the other sports. Jason Varitek was at the game today, and we saw David Ortiz talking to Zadorov and making friends with the the new Bruins and wanted to come support them. But yeah, you're right. Like I can't see Tristan Cassis and Jaron Duran coming to a hockey game. I don't know. Sometimes in the playoffs, they'll like some Celtics guys will show up and
Tristan Casas tries to just lay out on the ice bare.
It doesn't work.
No
the
shirt
same.
on. And he's like,
yeah.
Guys,
you might get frostbite.
I want to get your takes on two things quickly before we go. Very quick synopsis on Jeremy Swayman so far. It's this is his training camp still, right? Getting the kinks out because he was good against LA. Mets, not really great against Florida tonight. How do you guys feel about him so far? Montreal, obviously, was a high scoring game. A couple bad goals there, but nothing crazy. But I just feel like he hasn't had a game of action until Montreal. Now he's got 3 games. Feel like that he should be good to go now at this point.
Yeah, I don't know that it's given up like any truly soft goals, but LA, he was really good. The other 2 games, Montreal and Florida, I just think he's been fine. I did think the 4th Florida goal today, that was after the Coyle turnover, and then Laurie gets caught in a change. Thought you needed a save there. Lundell comes down, shoots from like a little inside the dot, and not a snipe at all. Like beat Swayman just over the right pad, kind of between the pad and his arm. That was a stoppable shot, and that was kind of. I know the Bruins did respond like a little over a minute later to get it back to 4-3, and you still had 5.5 minutes left in the game at that point. But that really felt like a backbreaker. Like Bruins are trying to make a push to tie the game, and that I don't know. Like again, it's not a truly soft goal, but I think you need a save there.
It's a game winner, right? So and I feel like we're still waiting to see that flashy big save. We haven't seen one yet this season. I don't think like the big show-stopping save. But I mean, sometimes those opportunities don't present themselves every game. So still better than if we had to watch 4 games of Korpisalo straight.
No doubt about that. And the last thing I wanted to get you guys' opinion on through the first week of the season, and it is the combination of the coaching and the players, the leadership on this team. Jim Montgomery is in the final year of his contract as it stands right now. No extension, though it was discussed in the preseason that they were working on one. It's interesting because obviously the Bruins have had very successful regular seasons under Montgomery, and I thought he did a pretty good job last season in the playoffs as well. You see a guy like Paul Maurice, the players galvanized behind him in Florida. That's a bit of a gamble. Not all players respond well to the hard ass type coach that I think is also a player's coach too. But the reason I bring up the coaching, and I'm going to say coaching in general, not just Jim Montgomery, and I'm also including the leadership core in here. So that's why I said the combination of the leaders and the coaching. It seems like there's been a bit of a trend going back to last year where they're not always starting on time, and you hear everybody's saying the right things before the game and post game, but when the puck drops, they're not always on their toes. And I'm wondering if you guys have any thoughts or opinions on that at this moment in time, / if it is a trend as the season goes on here, when it may become eyebrow raising for you guys. Obviously, right now they're 2-2. Like we all expect the Bruins to make the playoffs. It's not going to be anything where they're out of the playoffs. We don't think and need a coaching change. But have you noticed anything with that trend at all in the last, call it 6 months or so?
So I thought opening night looked a lot like just a carryover from the playoffs, where for whatever they just start a game or a period and cannot get a shot off on Florida. I thought their start Monday was actually pretty good right up until that Greer hit, until they just, again, and I think they just totally changed their mindset and dragged them back into what Florida wants the game to be, which is Bruins running around looking for revenge, taking penalties. So it is definitely something to keep an eye on because it has been a trend in the past. I'm not quite there for this season yet, but something to monitor for sure. You bring up coaching. Like, one thing I've been thinking about is, so they actually have a defense coach this year in Jay Leach. Last year, Joe Sacco ran the defense for the first time ever. He had never been a defensive coach. He's not a defensive coach by nature. Jay Leach has coached defense in the past. He coached defense in Seattle. And obviously the Bruins defense is not off to a very good start. So, I think there are some changes system-wise that they're getting used to, but some of it is also just like battling and just getting position at the front of the net. So I'm again, like, not panicking there either, but definitely something to watch. Like, they should not give up as many high danger chances as they did last year. Like, they have an actual defense coach, which I thought was going to be a big help. I still think it might be, but it hasn't been so far.
Yeah, there's still time, obviously, for that. And in terms of the slow starts, I thought that all four of the Bruins lines on Monday, in the first 5 minutes, all had a good shift. I think they didn't have a slow start Monday, but that doesn't mean that's not something that still creeps in some of the other games. And like you mentioned, the first game of the season, yes, for sure. And it's something to keep an eye on, but I don't think I noticed it the fourth game of the season at all, really. I thought they came out really strong. And like Scott said, they went away from that when everything started to get physical and very angry, which is not surprising. It was very par for the course for the last, now this is going into the third season of this just being what Bruins Panthers is, and they have to change the narrative at some point because they've lost the other times they've played like this against them.
Yeah, it's funny because when the Bruins play Florida, and that's the key distinction here. It's something about the matchup where the Bruins look less hard to play against, like whether it's mucking in the corners or back checking or just playing fast team speed. It looks like the Panthers are just playing a harder style of play all around the ice, more decisive. And then the Bruins get on the wrong side of a couple of calls and their temperament goes to hell. They get whiny, they get reactionary, they get petty, they start, and it's just not good. And that's why I want to include the players here, because that's not, Jim Montgomery can say whatever he wants. He probably is saying the right things, but it's on the players to, it's something about Florida, and until the Bruins can prove otherwise, the Panthers are Boston's kryptonite for sure. And it just seems they seem far away still. I know that it was a hard-fought 6-game series last year. This is the first week of the season. It's not really a fair time to compare teams at all. But yeah, between the ears, it's just Boston has a long way to go to show they can beat this team when it matters most.
Which is why I think 3 months off, or 3 months of not playing them, I think is going to be a good thing, because I do feel like there's a chance that it's like literally just this team. Like, we might go 3 months without the Bruins getting thrown off their game mentally like this. Like,
they might not lose.
Right.
They might lose for 3 months.
They'll be 30-2 going into their rematch.
I mean, every team's different. Every season's different. Lest we forget, Paul Maurice's first year as head coach for the Panthers, he had a meltdown on the Panthers bench in Ottawa, and the team was out of the playoff picture. And they turned it around, and they honestly haven't looked back. Now, Montgomery's in his third season as a Bruins head coach, so it's a little bit different. But yeah, the Bruins are going to be a good team this year. They're going to get the kinks out that they've been rusty at so far. But I think it's a good thing to play the Panthers twice this early on. I think it's just a reminder of where they need to get to. And it's a bit of a wake-up call for them. So here we go.
But by the way, this road trip coming up is not going to be an easy one. Colorado's off to a bad start. We didn't really have time to look at some of the weird starts like I had mentioned, but Colorado's another one along with Edmonton where you're like everyone thinks that's a cup contender, and they've through 2 games they've been awful. I don't know if they're playing the third tonight or not, but as we record on Monday. But like they're gonna be hungry. Like they need to get going. So that's how you start the road trip. Then you go to Utah, who's off to a red hot start. Like they've been really good, exceeding expectations so far. And then Nashville, another team off to a bad start that everyone thinks is going to be really good. So I think you're going to get some pretty hungry teams and some pretty good competition on this road trip.
Do you guys think, again, because we're talking about the first week of the NHL season, and it's not an indicative sign. Do you guys think the LA Kings, historically stingy defensive team, are having an 8-7 game against the Ottawa Senators in March? I don't think so. So any criticism we have of the games we've watched so far with the Bruins, it's simply because we can only talk about what's in front of us. It's not, it's short-sighted because it has to be. We record 3 times a week, but it's a crazy time of year.
Games to go off of.
Yeah, it's a crazy time of year for everybody. Yeah. It's chaos. It's organized chaos.
It's chaos for me already.
Yeah,
God, I swear I don't even know what day it is most of the time since hockey season started.
Right.
But by the way, Ottawa down to their 3rd goalie for that game because Allmark was banged up. He didn't play. Anton Forsberg got injured during the game. So Matt Sogard in. By the way, I was looking at Colorado because I knew they could give up a ton of goals. They lost 8-4 to Vegas and then 6-4 to Columbus.
Yeah, not great. Not great. Okay, what do we have coming up for the Bruins schedule, guys, before we sign off here? We have Colorado, as you mentioned, Scott, so they go out west. Okay. So they have Colorado. Are they playing Vegas?
No, Utah and Nashville.
Okay. All right. That'll be a good test. You said Utah's playing well. Nashville, slow start, but good roster. And Colorado, slow start, good roster. So thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you on Wednesday. Hey, guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.